Today's World Insight. China and the European Union, keen on pragmatic relations in pursuing common interests, but cooperation in what way and form? Insights from Danilo Türk, the former president of Slovenia.
What is needed today is a recognition, simply a recognition of mutual respect among major powers.
And China's national parks getting off the ground with the first batch of nature reserves. We'll take you to one of these best-kept secrets.
Here is our host, Tian Wei.
Hello and welcome to World Insight. I'm Tian Wei. China is willing to step up China-EU relations while safeguarding its sovereignty and security interests. That's said by Chinese President Xi Jinping in a phone call with European Council President Charles Michel last week. The European Council President said the EU seeks practical cooperation with China in the green and the digital economy and keep close contact on major international issues. Earlier, I spoke to a European insider, Danilo Türk, the former Slovenian president. He is now the president of Club de Madrid. He shares his views on security, leadership, carbon emission cuts, and the 50th anniversary of China taking back its lawful United Nations seat. Let's take a listen. And joining me, Danilo Türk, former president of Slovenia and president of Club de Madrid. Mr. President, what a pleasure to see you once again.
The pleasure is mine.
Development and security, those are the important topics for the forum going on right now, arranged by Boao Forum for Asia. Many look at China's agenda. Development has always been the key word. But how does security relate to everything that we are talking about today, Mr. President?
I think security is always fundamental because without security, development is limited. Of course, the worst violation of security is war, and during a war, there can hardly be any development. But even in situations which are not fully secure, development is not expressed to the full. And therefore, I think the need to look into the relationship between development and security is really important. If we want to have fast development, comprehensive development, then we have to have strong security. I mean, that's the basic aspect of this relationship. Obviously, one can also say that without development, security will not be sustainable, which is also true, but that works in the longer term. If development is lacking, then over time, security may deteriorate. Therefore, one has to ensure secure conditions for development and then invest in development in every respect, not only economic, but also social, ecological, and other aspects of development in order to create a good and solid basis for security on the long term.
Well, that's quite a philosophical explanation of the relationship between security and development. But Danilo, if you look at what's going on in the world, emphasizing much on security, will that make all of us more unilateral than multilateral?
Right now, as you very rightly said, the problem is that we don't have the level of security which the world would deserve. In order to deal with issues like global warming comprehensively, effectively, with total commitment of everybody, we would need to have a stronger sense of security, because security is not only an objective fact. Security is also a psychological situation. And right now, when we see all this talk about additional, military arrangements, when we see additional military activity, then obviously that creates a sense that security is not what it should be. As a result, the political climate is not what it should be. And then obviously that is felt also in the talks about environment, about climate change and others. Because in order to have a good discussion on climate change and effective action on climate change, you have to have better security and better confidence, which is really a result of security and needed for everything else that we do.
Very true. You know, talking about confidence and trust, that is exactly what we are having in huge deficit these days. We see with the approaching Glasgow COP26, there are a lot of discussion, Danilo, about what should be the commitments that every country makes. Of course, there are a lot of commitments that countries already committed to, for example, China. But there's also a huge push about China commit more, you know, probably as much as developed economy. How do you see these kinds of pushing others to do more, while at the same time, a lack of trust and confidence in this, you know, camaraderie in a way?
Yeah, well, you are right. A lack of trust and confidence really diminishes the ability for everybody to do his or her utmost. Now, let me be more specific. You see, we now have reached the point at which all the major players have expressed their general commitment to carbon neutrality by 2050 or 2060. But the critical question is no longer that. Now, we know what the objective should be. What is most important at this time are the midterm measures of next 5 to 10 years, which will ensure that the movement towards those objectives takes place. Now, that would require very serious and very difficult decisions on the transition to other sources of energy, sources which are not carbon intensive. And for that, you need confidence among states. States would have to rely on each other in that regard. And we simply do not have enough of confidence to be sure that this midterm activity, the transition to less carbon intensive sources of energy will take place. We see this in Europe nowadays. We have a discussion right now on how to relate to rising prices of natural gas. And there are some who would say, well, that Russia is to blame because the prices are growing. That's a wrong approach completely, because, of course, the market has driven prices of natural gas up, but one has to trust that Russia will do its part to the extent it can to stabilize the market. And, you know, in this short and mid-term decisions, we would need much more confidence than we currently have.
But probably that is a rare commodity this time, particularly leading up to Glasgow, which is only weeks away. So, Mr. President, given your rich international expertise and understanding of how politics works, you know, what can we grasp to at this point?
I would caution against too high expectations in Glasgow. The inadequate level of confidence among states and inadequate common platform for action, political platform for action, that is clearly a problem. And then obviously there is also a problem of COVID-19. Glasgow and United Kingdom is now facing a new wave of the pandemic. Yeah. And obviously all these are limiting factors. So we should not expect too much from a single conference. What would be much more needed, I think, is a direct and honest communication among the key leaders of the world to develop an adequate level of confidence for the future, and also exchange information on what exactly they are doing to make sure that their plans for transition are implemented. That's really more needed than the Glasgow conference per se.
Right. At the recent UN General Assembly, Chinese president has been talking about not to fund any more coal power plants in other parts of the world. That's a big commitment from China, as you may know. That has a lot to do with the future infrastructure building agenda of China overseas, and also how will China develop industries with others. So, Mr. President, when you look at China's commitment, and also particularly China's commitment toward 2030, which is the midterm goal, as you said, for carbon peak, how do you see these commitments?
But you see, the interesting thing here also has to do with trust. If you look at the Western commentators, they would say, well, it's all fine and good that China has announced not to finance carbon-fueled energy production anymore outside China. Hey, but what's happening inside China? So, I mean, you have a kind of a logic, or again, a philosophy, if you wish, which creates distrust. Now, I think what would be much more interesting and much more needed right now would be a serious information about what is China doing at home in its plan to reach the carbon peak before 2030. Because what interested me most was when I saw news in the Chinese media suggesting, well, it is declared that the peak will be achieved by 2030, but now we can actually achieve it a few years earlier. My question now would be, well, let's tell us more. How exactly are you planning to do different things in the energy sector, in the evolution of manufacturing, public transportation, traffic in general, and so forth? That would be a very interesting debate.
Right.
Unfortunately, in the international media, we don't see that debate. And that actually is a problem which has to do with this inadequate levels of trust.
China, as you know, Mr. President, is celebrating 50th anniversary together with the United Nations about China's resumption of lawful seats at the United Nations. This is already 50 years, of course, a huge transformation. You've been interacting with China when you were president of Slovenia, even before that when you were serving as an academic in the country, and you are also doing that when you are president of the Club of Madrid, which is, bringing together all the former leaders from different parts of the world. How do you see, China and the UN today in this very dramatic time?
Well, I still remember the years 1970 and 1971. I was following the United Nations already as a young man at that time. And in 1970, I was very excited to see that procedurally it was agreed that the representation of China in the United Nations is no longer an important issue. Now, this is a procedural trick. If something is defined as an important issue, then you need 2/3 majority. It was decided that this is no longer the case, so subsequently, a majority was much more easily achieved, and it became very large. So I followed that debate in 70-71 with great excitement, because it was already very clear to everybody who knew a little bit about the United Nations that this will have a transformative effect over a period of time. And now, in the last decades, we have seen this effect happening. What is needed today is a recognition, simply a recognition of mutual respect among major powers. I think we are still somehow under the influence of an era of unipolarity, which was there between 1990 until recently, where the feeling was that there is only one hyperpower and one superpower, and everybody else is junior. Now, that sort of mentality should give way to a more respectful relationship among major powers, and a more respectful relationship between major powers and others in the United Nations. That's the need of our time. It's a political need, it's achievable, but we do not see it yet happening. And that is what I would say concerns me a little bit. I hope this will be remedied.
But President Türk, as you may know, you served in the United Nations. You served in the United Nations during some turbulent times. So how do you see now, things seem to be complicated in a different way. So President Türk, with your political knowledge and expertise, how do you see what we are going through right now?
Well, we are going through a rather confusing period, confusing in a sense that it is not clear how the relations between major powers will evolve in the near future, in a year, 2 years to 5 years from now. Well, of course, being an optimist, I hope that they will eventually reach a kind of a balanced situation based on mutual respect and mutual advantage. The Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, just published a report called Our Common Agenda. So you see, the Secretary General has offered a blueprint, a plan how to move forward. And it would be wonderful if United Nations as a whole could support that plan. For the big powers, for the permanent members of the Security Council, there will also be an additional need. I hope they could meet at the summit level sometime soon and discuss how to move ahead.
Mr. President, there are so many things that are going on right now. Some say we're having triple crisis, you know, whether it's biodiversity, climate change, pandemic. Some say the crises are even more. But we are at a time when leadership is not at its highest point, shall we put it that way, politely. What can you expect from the United Nations, which you used to serve in a very important position? You try to bring all the politics together so that there could be what you call, and the Secretary General put in the report, a common agenda.
You know, the Secretary General in his report explained the situation very clearly and very simply. He said, we are at a point at which we can have a breakthrough or breakdown, and we have to choose. So I think that that's a very dramatic reminder made by the Secretary General and addressed to, of course, all member states of the United Nations, but primarily to the largest ones. I mean, we should choose. Do we want to break down? Probably not. We want to break through? Well, hopefully, yes. And if we want to break through, it is pretty clear what needs to be done.
The Winter Olympics Games is coming up. It's going to be in Beijing coming winter. What is your expectation? Is Slovenia, your home country, going to send a strong team?
Surely, and we like to win medals in Winter Olympics. So we hope that we shall, have some Olympic medals as a result. But of course, we understand, the difficulty. I mean, this is still the time of the pandemic, and the International Olympic Committee decided that the Olympic Games will be reduced to athletes and their teams, and that's, I think, reasonable. Everybody else will be watching the Olympic Games on TV, which is what I like to do also. So I will be watching the Olympic competitions, and I hope that our skiers, ski jumping, ski flying, and alpine skis, Nordic skis, I mean, we have excellent athletes, and I hope that they are going to be successful.
Do you already put in your bet with your friends about how many medals or things like that?
No, look, this is but this is a serious question and one of a principle. I never make bets on medals. I think that, look, the principle of Olympic Games is to participate and to do your utmost.
Absolutely.
So for me, when I see such an effort, when people, the athletes, do their utmost and they achieve a result, I'm very happy. I'm very encouraged. If they receive a medal, that's an additional advantage.
Right.
We support them to do their best and be happy when they achieve their best.
That was my conversation with Danilo Türk, former Slovenian president. You're watching World Insight. Coming up, China's national parks getting off the ground with the first batch of nature reserves. I will take you to one of these best-kept secrets right after the break. Welcome back. This is World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Let's now get on a wildlife adventure in a little-known reserve in China called Tangjiahe. It's part of China's Giant Panda National Park, which was officially designated as one of China's first group of national parks. Chinese President Xi Jinping announced the plan via video during last week's UN Biodiversity Conference in Kunming, which is meant to beef up the national park system in this country. Home to nearly 30% of the key terrestrial wildlife species found in China, the list includes the Sanjiangyuan National Park, the Giant Panda National Park, the Northeast China Tiger and Leopard National Park, the Hainan Tropical Rainforest National Park, and the Wuyishan National Park. They cover a protected land area of 230,000 square meters. Now, it is time for all of us to go into the wild, into the mountains. Budding national parks. China on the right track for biodiversity protection. This is one of China's earliest nature reserves, a natural habitat for the giant panda and many more. Now shines with new life. Come with me for an exclusive access to an exhilarating journey into the wild. It's like an early morning greeting. So in the morning, usually what kinds of animals will be most active?
比如说像斑羚呀、羚牛啊，包括那种小鸡、野猪那食肉类呢，就是比如说大熊猫、黑熊，黄骨貂、豹猫这些就比较容易见到动物的，因为它是一大片林间的这种空地，草皮长得比较好。
还能学出它们的叫声吗？
低威胁程度的一种警告啊，这种呜叫声，要亲密的那种关系。
哦，看见了，看见了，看见了，那树丛中看见了。
这些河道里边啊，就是
已经很开心了。
这保护区最大的特点就是你真的来就能看到动物，而且是自然状态生长的动物。巧克力给我吃的这样，防晒霜给我咬漏了，还有血，留个脚印儿哈，疯了。
惯犯。
这个是我们的红外相机。
哦，
对，哦，这是毛关鹿，毛关鹿。哦，羚牛。羚牛。
哦，他到这来还看了。
对。哦，这种水麻果就很甜，它会吃这个，相对来说热量比较高，吃这个来补充热量。它应该是就去年春天的时候，跟妈妈一起从冬眠洞里出来的那些小熊，因为母熊会在冬眠的时候产下小崽儿，所以经历了去年一整年的生长，然后到今年这个时候呢，正好是已经脱离了妈妈，然后自己来建立新的领地。
Budding national parks. China on the right track for biodiversity protection. This is one of China's earliest nature reserves, a natural habitat for the giant panda and many more. Now shines with new life. Come with me for an exclusive access to an exhilarating journey into the wild. A great adventure, isn't it? Into the mountains. That's all we have for today. If you'd like to see more, search World Insight or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei on behalf of the team. Thanks for watching. Bye for now and have a great weekend.